internally building those functions with leaders that you can actually trust, that meet your mostly reasonable expectations, right? You're going to continue to push them, especially the more that they grow, and there's going to be challenges there, but within reason, and discussions that are designed in such a way to invite like new ideas and optimizations or challenge what's existing. And not only doing that with your internal team too, but is really in establishing like who those teams are that you need to partner with, whether it's an agency, whether it's a service, a tool that you need, and what do those partnerships look like to you, and how can you both, mutually benefit one another, and how can you maximize what that relationship is.
This is the Revenue-Driven CMO. I'm your host, Chris Mechanic. Join me as I uncover the secrets of the world's most elite CMOs, marketing leaders. The Revenue-Driven CMO is sponsored by Web Mechanics, the AI-driven performance agency that makes you smarter. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Revenue-Driven CMO. We've got an amazing episode in store for you here today. Our guest today is a dynamic leader. She's an incredible marketer. She's just so talented in so many ways. She's very well-rounded and so articulate, just like an amazing leader, marketer, and person overall. But I think what makes her so unique and so powerful, it goes beyond just her marketing skills. It's really like her communication and her incredible ability to build high performance teams. Like she's done that, repetitively multiple times throughout her career. She grew up in the agency world leading enterprise accounts and is just about the first agency person that I've ever met to come out and say, look, clients are great, but really I put my people first. And I think some people probably raised some eyebrows about that at first, but it worked. And so she climbed the ranks, the agency ranks, and once she achieved pretty much everything that was able to be achieved there, she went client side, where she is now, putting her marketing and team building skills to work in the same way as head of marketing and online experience at American Public Education, which is a major player in the EDU space, known for providing innovative and affordable education through a group of subsidiary brands. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to my good friend and colleague, Miss Haleigh Forbes. Welcome, Haleigh. How are you?
No, I'm good. Thank you. That was quite the introduction. I didn't know what you were going to say, and I appreciate everything that's really sunk in over our, relationship and conversations. That was a great introduction. I did just want to add one thing too. So I also work as a board member for an organization called the Casey Cares Foundation, which provides different types of experiences for critically ill children and their families. And it's just a wonderful organization. So just wanted to plug that as well.
Love that. That's really cool. We'll definitely include a link to that. I am curious, before we jump in, like, how did you get into that? Or
So a friend of mine is on the board as well, and had really done a great job of mobilizing his sort of social circle to get involved in the 5K runs, and they have a gala every year. And so I kind of jumped into a lot of that participation, and then an opening, there was an opening on the board, and he put my name up. We kind of instantly connected with Casey, and there I am.
That's awesome. That's a great cause. I'm like getting chills a little bit right now because I have little kids too.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, what would I do if one of them was critically ill? Like, I would die.
Well, yeah, and this, a lot of what this is just giving them these positive moments and experiences when they're otherwise going through something horrific. And it's not just for the child, it's for the families too. And so bringing the sibling along who's also going through that trauma, the parents along. So it's a day at the zoo or the Ravens game, and we're in multiple places, but it really is just providing those moments where they could be a family together and have those happy memories. So please check
I
them
will.
out.
I'll definitely check them out. Everybody listening, please check them out too. We'll include a link here in the show notes. And I'd like to donate also to it personally if I could.
Oh, wonderful.
That'd be great.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, this conversation, this has already gone so well.
Right. All right. Well, Haleigh, you know what the people want. They want the secrets. They want the lowdown. You've had such an amazing career. You're just getting started and just getting cranked up. But like so far, what has been one of your big secrets to success?
Yeah, so I think, you really hit on it in the intro too. And, I'm not going to present this under the guise that this is a secret because it's by no means a secret. However, when I think back on the success that I've had throughout my career, and the growth and the trajectory of that, it's really been because I've had the right team. And that's not sort of the luck of the draw, right? At some point it is when you're more junior, but the more senior you are, the more hand you have in who that team is and how they operate and what their structure is. It becomes really important for that to be at the forefront, I think, of what success looks like for you because, internally building those functions with leaders that you can actually trust, that meet your mostly reasonable expectations, right? You're going to continue to push them, especially the more that they grow. And there's going to be challenges there, but, within reason and discussions that are designed in such a way to invite like new ideas and optimizations or challenge what's existing. Um, and not only doing that with your internal team too, but is really in establishing like who those teams are that you need to partner with, whether it's an agency, whether it's a service, a tool that you need, and what do those partnerships look like to you, and how can you both, mutually benefit one another, and how can you maximize what that relationship is. And there's that analogy right now that's like been floating. It's like an old analogy, but it's been floating out there on social a lot to explain marketing using the circus. Do you know what I'm
No, I
talking
haven't
about?
seen that. Tell us about it then.
Yeah. Well, it's just an analogy. It's like, if you do this, that's marketing. If you do this, that's sales. If you do this, this is promotions and so on and so forth. And so, but if you do all of it, that's marketing. Like,
Mhm.
that's like the big
Yeah.
reveal. Um, and while it's a great analogy for explaining marketing, right? And that it's this orchestration, um, and helps just simplify the explanation of it to just, a normal person. What it highlights to me being in this industry is the breadth of the skill set and the team that you need in order to have a holistic and strategic marketing
Yeah.
operation. And I learned early on that, and I think it's a plus by nature, that working together as a unit with clear expectations, bringing people up the ladder with you, and not being like an individual contributor and not only being focused on like the business and the operation aspect of the role, but hiring the right people and growing them, that's where you're going to have the long-term success. It's like investing in brand almost and like organic, like that's where you're going to see that long-term return. And plus it allows you to move forward in your roles if you've got this succession kind of plan behind you and, and the team is operating well. So, and it's never going to be perfect, of course. You're never going to have everybody firing at 100% all the time, and people are going to grow at different times and all of that, but if that's what you're focused on, building a strategic and curious and performance driven team, then you're going to have success long term.
Hey, exclusive for listeners of this podcast, Web Mechanics will do 10 to 20 hours of work for you for free. Literally no sales calls, no BS. Just give them a problem and they will put a team to work for you for free for 10 to 20 hours, even if you're already a client. If you're struggling with demand gen, lead gen, SEO, SEM, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, conversion optimization, if you can't get Facebook or Meta ads to work for the life of you, or you can't figure out attribution, Web Mechanics will take a good hard look at whatever problem you give them, whatever programs you put in front of them, and they will give you an objective, informed opinion, plus some advice from 10 to 20 hours of senior level attention. So I would suggest take them up on this offer. It's ridiculous. Go to revenue-drivencmo.com/free, fill out the 2-minute form, and you will not regret it. Literally zero downside, unlimited potential for growth. So do yourself a favor, revenue-drivencmo.com/free, no hyphens, no punctuations. You will be happy about that decision. I love that. I love that. And I need help with that badly. Like I think historically, so I'm going to selfishly turn this into like a little mini consulting session, but I think the listeners will get
Yes,
value
there you
from
go.
it too. there's spectrum of leaders, right? There's like toward individualistic, and then there's like the team, the team builder. I personally am more toward the individualistic. So I've got several follow-up questions on that. One is like on team structure. So like, you
Mhm.
enter a new org. I know you've been at APEI for a little while now, but say you enter that new org. How do you first determine, you know, like, is it first, like people first, like you need the right people and then you'll figure out the seats, or is it seats first and then people fill up?
Oh, that's interesting. So I think that for me, it is identifying both the structure of the function. So when I joined APEI, the marketing team actually looked quite different than it does now. And so I started with establishing what were those functions and sort of lines of teams, right? That I needed to establish and really differentiate from one another. What were those functions? What were the roles? If I were to just build a team, what were the roles that I would need in order to work straight across, the number of institutions that I'm managing, the budget, et cetera? What are those roles? And then who do I have that fills those roles already? Who is maybe misplaced? And then, can I manipulate some of what I have in order to make this person fit? Or in some instances, they're just not the right fit any
Yeah.
longer. Um, and then, what's remaining is, those roles that you would otherwise be hiring that, from the outside for. Um, so I think it's a little bit of both, because I think part of it is, not being so rigid that you can't adjust a role for the right person that comes in. But I think if you're just starting at it like 30,000-foot view and climbing down, you're looking at what are the needs of the business in order to run the business effectively. And then who do I have to fill that?
Yeah. And then like what are some of the routines that you have, or the rituals, or like are there certain things that you'll do with each of your direct reports that you feel strengthens them, or enhances their value to the team?
Um,
Like one-to-ones, for
so I
instance, might be an
think that
example.
Well, I think that, I don't know of any sort of, I'm not like aside from the fact that I wake up quite early, and I have my kind of routine in the morning and everything and all that. I'm not an overly sort of processized person, especially in terms of my individual attention to, someone that I'm working with. Um, that said, and that withstands, any performance meetings that we might have weekly or strategic meetings and things like that. But in terms of like the individual and the team and how we're doing and the growth and all that stuff, um, I have one-on-ones. My team is largely remote. We don't go into an office. So they're, video one-on-ones. But one of the things that I think that I've been really successful in developing these relationships and really pushing people to grow is transparency and clear
Yeah.
communication. So like everyone is afraid to have a real conversation with one another and say, you know, even ask for feedback, right? If you really want to grow in your career, you can ask for feedback far more frequently than probably people are going to give it to you naturally too. And so that's certainly a tool that everybody should be using more. But even as a leader, in proactively like having these conversations with people that aren't focused on just this like annual cycle of performance reviews, but like in the moment, let's talk about how we could have done this better, or hey, we did this great. What's an area that you think that you can improve on from, this last QBR round or whatever it
Yeah.
was, right? And having those types of conversations very openly, fluidly, regularly, I think is absolutely critical. And doing it in a way that is, I'm here to support you. I'm here for your growth. You know, this is to move forward
Yeah.
together. And it becomes very organic in that way too.
Yeah. I
So,
think that's a great
uh,
takeaway. Like more candid, more frequent feedback and communication. I think a lot of people, myself included, get caught up in that. Like sometimes there will be something that, one of your team members does that you dislike or you think could be better. And it's easier, like the hard thing to do is to stop and have a conversation with that person, right? The easy thing to do is just to fix it yourself or, just move on kind of with your
True.
day. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I can see how it's far more powerful to do it in the opposite order, like to take that time, call that person. It's hard to do it on Slack too. I feel like things get just so mixed up with Slack and email. Um, how how do you
Yeah,
handle a situation
yeah,
like
it's
that? Like
certainly.
if a person is like, "Hey, here you go, Haleigh, like here's XYZ deliverable that you asked for," and it's like not there, what mode of communication do you lean toward? Like, will you give that constructive criticism like in writing typically, or do you call them up on their cell phone real quick, or how do you? I know that's a micro question.
I mean, I would. Yeah, I would typically. I mean, if I needed them to change it in the moment, then I would probably just call
Yeah.
them straight up. Although, well, one thing to consider, because I think a lot about this too, one thing to consider is some people don't like that, especially if you're getting data. So, like, from a analytics person, and they're not somebody that wants to be interrupted in that moment for your call because you're prioritizing you, right? And like they need a moment. If you just pinged them first and were like, "Hey, just want to talk to you real quick about like this spreadsheet that you sent over. You let me know when you have
Hmm.
5 minutes," so that it allows them to like prepare for that. And so I think that adjusting to the way that you communicate to align with some of their communication style and how they receive information best or can prepare the information best. I think for you to be hyper aware of that or try to be aware of it anyway. You can't, know everything, but certainly try and be considerate of it. Then again, you'll get a better
Hmm.
outcome,
Yeah,
you know?
100%.
Uh, yeah.
Now,
So,
it seems like you're a great coach, right? And it seems like you're probably pretty patient and communicative. Um, do you have like a rule of thumb or any other kind of guidance to like at what point do you say, okay, it's time to go on a pip, or like, okay, this like just isn't really working? I know that's a
oh,
hard one. You don't have to
yeah.
answer that.
It's not. Unfortunately, I've dealt with that several times throughout my career, but very recently. Um, I think that okay, so there's like the art answer to this and the science answer to this. There's very clear expectations, or there should be, of any role that somebody is in. And if there isn't, that's your bad and you need to fix that. But otherwise, there should be clear expectations of what the role is. It can be very tactical. And but regardless, you've both technically agreed to them, and so if they're not meeting those expectations, and they generally aren't able to do that in that first like 90 days or so, then that's kind of easy. But sometimes it's not that black and white, right? And sometimes it is more of the strategic or critical thinking or leadership or, some of these intangible kind of characteristics about an individual, both in their skill set, right? And how they think about marketing strategy and how they think about measurement and the future of marketing and all of this. Um, and and even how they, lead a team and organize a team around these objectives and how they're prioritizing different things and etc. And and then, being able to just like technically execute the job. Um, and so that can be a lot harder to it, you have to, I think, be a bit more patient with that one because that's a little harder to, I think, um, you know, mature or see that progress over time. But at the end of the day, if somebody is not meeting the expectations of what you know the role to be and what your standard is, and you have solicited others' feedback, which I think is incredibly important in that as a part of the process, so that you remove as much of your own bias as possible, um, and get collective feedback across the group. And until you feel comfortable that that you've gone through the process of communicating with that person, setting those clear expectations, hey, I had this expectation. I of you coming into this role, I don't believe that you're meeting it for XYZ reasons. Let's work on this over the next 4 weeks. That would then be a very clear follow-up email. And then, if they don't meet it, then that's the next conversation that you have. So, yeah, I mean, it's not fun, but I do think that it's a little bit of instinct. It's a little bit of gut. But it's also, whether or not they're just even meeting the standard expectations of the role, which unfortunately
Yeah,
does happen.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a tough thing. And I've personally been guilty of under communicating, waiting too long, bottling up
Yeah.
frustrations. It's not great. It's not healthy.
Yeah. Well, it gets you in trouble too. It's not like a good feeling when that's the case. And then you have to like kind of, hustle to make the case, but your mind's already set for, whatever it is. And so it's just not a good journey for either of
Right,
you at
right.
that point. And that's what that's the kind of point, is that like learning that early on, that like it was important to just have like an open line of communication and transparent and trustworthy communication, right? Like I want people to feel like they can be open with me. Like I'll be open with them and honest with them, and transparent with them. And having that, establishing that is so critical too. I think, to being able to provide that type of feedback and for that person to not be
Yeah,
defensive on a regular basis, because a lot. And I mean, it's not all bad. It should be equally positive, by the way. If they're doing a kick-ass job, there's as much positive feedback that we should be giving regularly, and creating a culture of that, as there is, these are the things that we're
yeah,
working on. So
100%. Well, I want to talk about
yeah.
APEI soon. But before we do that, I'm curious, like on team building, what are some ways that you cultivate and reinforce like a performance culture, a high performing culture?
Um, I think that I mean, it starts with a high performing culture. I think just starts with like, I guess, two things. One is having sort of the processes in place, the framework, right? The scaffolding in place that sets a very clear expectation of both the urgency and the velocity in which you move, um, but also allows for a lot of like agility and autonomy within that. And so, first of all, having, providing the right resources and tools at their disposal to allow people to do their job kind of, to the max, um, having the right data, right, in place, encouraging a testing, and testing kind of culture, so that we're testing everything, and we're constantly optimizing and evaluating. And if that's just the expectation, that like we don't I heard, what was that? It might have been another podcast, but I heard somebody say that once something's a best practice, nothing should ever become a best practice, because we're just constantly iterating. Like once it becomes a best practice, then like it's outdated, and we need to probably iterate on
Okay.
that, and or at least check in with ourselves to say, should this still be a best practice, right? Does this still exist in our world? And so I love the idea of that, because it just means that there's either constant iteration, which is good because the world around us is constantly iterating, or there's just a QA check to make sure that you're still good, And if you've got that culture of that, then and then you've got the whole team aspect that I was talking about, and by the way, within all of that too is obviously having established goals with individuals that both align to sort of the direction of the business, as well as their personal, what they want from their next role and career
Hmm.
growth. Um, so with all of that team stuff too, if you're kind of happy in that way, and you've got a clear path forward, and you've got a trustworthy relationship with your manager, and then you've got the scaffolding in place so that the team can operate efficiently and at a fast clip, and they are encouraged to constantly be optimizing and testing. It all sort of just like goes in the right direction and at the right speed, right? If like that's it. And of course, I'm painting all of this like it all just works perfectly, which it doesn't. But that's what we strive for,
Yeah.
right? And that's,
I like the phrase
that's
scaffolding.
our conversation.
Scaffolding. I've not heard that
Yeah.
used in this context, but what do you mean exactly when you say that? Like the structure, the framework, the systems, or?
Yeah, like what's the framework that's holding up this entire operation, right? So like, when we're developing when we're, when we're developing 120 pieces of SEO content a month for these institutions, you're not going to do that throwing off one-off emails to Joe in compliance and Sue in QA and all these other people. You need an entire operation around
Right.
that, right? But it also needs, and so you need sort of the processes in place in order to do that efficiently and at scale, and the project management team in place in order to manage all of that, and all the different teams within that, whether it's agency or not. But then you also need to allow them to sort of define what testing looks like within that, right? And like, or, is 120 enough? Should we have more? What more would it take in order to do that? How many more resources? That sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so that's why it's like just sort of the scaffolding and not this like totally done up, perfect building, because it's they need to have some room to kind of optimize and play within that, but they need to at least have the processes, tools, and operational, kind of function around them to support that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um,
Yeah.
and then one last question before we move to API. I'm having a great time, by the way.
Yeah, no, me too. I love talking about this kind
This
of
is
stuff.
inspiring and informative. I'm sure that everyone is getting value from this. But I'm curious, like, how would you describe your leadership style in general, and like, how have you noticed it sort of evolving over the years?
um, I think that my leadership style is nurturing yet demanding. Um, I have I would say that I have high expectations for those that, I see sort of the highest potential in. Um, but I also think that I just have higher expectations in general, but I'm also fair, that, I did not hire a bunch of clones, and these people operate differently. People, grow differently, excel differently. They take different paths, things like that. And they're going to have, different ways of delivering things to me. Right. And, um, and so again, this is where it's really important to set very clear expectations with, you know, what it is I expect of them and in these roles. But at the same time, too, understand that they're also going to have their own way of getting there, and that at different moments and through that path they may need my support more than others, um, but at a bare minimum, they understand the expectations that they have to be hitting, and they may say, hey, that's going to be a big job for me. I need this kind of support from you in order, if you could provide this type of coaching, or whatever it is, right? But like having those conversations so that they know that I will be there to support them, but at the same time, they've got to give something back to me, and that's in performance and doing their jobs well, and meeting the expectations that both you came in on, that I set, right? And then the ones that we've aligned on together in terms of their career
Yeah.
growth. Um so
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of
I find it incredibly difficult to set clear expectations sometimes, like, especially in a world where it's like a team effort. Like, for instance, like we do a
yeah.
newsletter, right? And there's multiple different people involved in that newsletter, and the lines get a little bit fuzzy at times. Other times it's easy, but I'm curious, like when you go about setting and clarifying expectations, just what it looks like. Like, is that sort of just like 5 bullet points, or is that activity based mostly? Like, do 10 pages a month, or is that outcomes based, or is it a blend? Like, how does that actually look?
No, I mean, it could be any of those things. Cause like if it happens, so great example is at my previous agency where I worked, our client, it was like you mentioned, it was the house count, it was massive. We had tons of people working on this. There were so many different functions. We were completely ingrained with them. They were savvy, super savvy on the client side too. And they had a huge team. We worked with a whole bunch of different people through different systems, all these things. And there were like 1,000 expectations of everybody. And in the best ways. But anyway, because it was a great partnership. And that was something I wanted to highlight too. But regardless, we at one point it had grown in at such a scale and so quickly because of the success that we were having that we had a lot of those challenges too, where it was like very inefficient at times, particularly cross functionally and, across teams on both the EU side or, the institution side, the client side, as well as our side, and the processes that everything would have to go through. And so we sat down for like a half a day in a meeting room and just put together a straight up RISI. And I sometimes hate RISIs because I'm like, they're just a pain in the ass, frankly, sometimes. But at that level, it's got to be really damn clear at every tactical step who's doing what, and then, there's the sort of maturity of that too, how that all gets scoped out at what time frame, what are the SLAs around things, yada yada. So yes, sometimes it can be as like very specific and granular as that, and that is very, very necessary. And I highly encourage it. This is why I think project management is the most undervalued team anywhere. Outside of, obviously website dev, things like that, where, they're highly reliant on project management teams. Just companies in general underestimate the value of having a project manager and somebody sort of like orchestrating this whole circus,
Yeah,
Um,
I would
so,
agree with that.
um,
And actually,
yeah, yeah. So, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, in this new role, so Level and Web Mechanics merged. I am still, president of Web Mechanics and still working on that, but I'm straddling this line of chief revenue officer, they say, but that basically just means that I'm in charge of like everything sales and marketing. So it's a big job. Luckily,
Yeah, totally.
um, I'm coming in with a very strong team. Uh, there's a couple of people that, on the level side that are also very strong, but literally the first hire we made is a great project manager.
Amazing. I love that. That makes me so happy. It really is. It's like, I mean, it makes everybody's jobs easier, and having somebody, there's so many component parts that to do that successfully and like, and orchestrate all of that in following a certain timeline and on a certain budget, because oftentimes a lot of that is sort of forgotten about. To do that efficiently, there needs to be oversight and there needs to be a system in place that's helping you drive that. So I mean, you will benefit so hugely from having that role. That's
That's
awesome.
great. Or I look forward to it, hopefully. Cool. Well, time is getting away from us here. I want to talk about APEI just a little bit here. Could you start with just like a high level overview for folks that aren't too familiar?
Oh yeah. So I think that you introduced them well. They're a leading education services provider that we own five different institutions. It really rolls up to four universities, but five different institutions, different brands, providing, government training and certificates to the entire nursing suite, pre-licensure nursing up to the DMP, online portfolios. Um, so and we really sit, as the marketing team amongst other teams, IT, some others, as a center of excellence for each of those institutions. So we, in a way, even though they're wholly owned by APEI, um, it's very much, and this is what attracted me to this role, was there's still an agency kind of feel to it a little bit, um, because I've got five
Yeah,
clients and I still have different conversations and different types of conversations and levels of conversations with the different institutions. And so in that way, that appealed to me because I was very intentionally going, um, brand side, but I liked the idea of still having sort of the variety in things that I got from the
That's
agency
all.
side.
So you've got these various different brands that you're running. I'm curious about how's your team structured? Like, do you have different teams for each brand, or do you have sort of one master team and everybody works on 5 brands?
Yeah, it really depends on the function, because some of them are, require more support on for the university than others. Paid media being a good example of that, where um, each of the individuals on the team are dedicated to a certain brand. Paid media, obviously we spend a lot there. We're across all the major platforms. So there's obviously the specialists, within sort of the social and display area, as well as, the sort of distinct skill set, obviously, of paid search. So those are dedicated. Where there's smaller teams that, share resources across brands. SEO, actually, we actually just hired somebody, an additional team member, because I think that requires some additional dedication. But SEO has a lot of like blended teams across the different universities. So it really just depends on, kind of where we've been able to make the investment up until this point. What was where, where were the priorities really of the needs that were on the team? Um, when I joined, there were five or six people on the marketing team. And it was kind of like a couple functions. And then at this point, 2 years later, we're up to 22 people on the marketing team across 6 functions.
Wow.
So really building, kind of starting with each of those, building them out, establishing, which kind of what was the next role that we would need in, and we're just going to continue to grow that out and or, leverage agencies where applicable to, which, I think that it was really important for us to kind of bring it in house and manage it ourselves. But we absolutely still lean on agencies as well as flex resources, being experts in a certain area. Um, so yeah, that's how the team is kind of structured today, and how we break it up. And I think one of the advantages to this too is that, the team, I emphasize wanting the team to talk amongst themselves, right? So it's not just Carly on this one school that is doing her work in a silo. And a lot of the times we'll use, different institutions' tests on one another. So we might see success on APUS and then we try that on Rasmussen and vice versa. And that's been actually hugely rewarding because in some instances, maybe they either weren't in a position to test that thing yet. They didn't have the budget. They didn't, whatever it kind of was. There might have been a constraint, so we were able to test it on, one kind of school first, and then test it on the other. And so it's really been, you can kind of see the benefit of both dedicated resources as well as blended resources. As long as the expectations are set again on like what the percentage is that you're dead, for shared resources, particularly. We don't want it would be very easy for a university to monopolize an individual's time, even though they're meant to be shared. And so it's also really important to have sort of the data behind that and understand, are they, proportioning their time appropriately, to maximize kind of what each school needs of them. So it's a long answer for a short question, but it can even get that complicated.
No, I get it. What would you say is like one of the biggest mistakes you've made, or otherwise like a lesson that you've learned that has been really impactful for you?
Um, so I think two things. One is so several years ago, this is a while ago. It was around the holidays, and my boss and mentor, um, who led the US at Jellyfish, he had we were talking about the holiday plans, and I said, I'm just going to work because um, nobody else is here. It's otherwise quiet. I'm going to get a lot done. yada, yada. A lot of other people are off. So I'm just going to stay here. And he just said, you're crazy. Don't do that. You're better when you've taken time off. And that was it. That was the only thing he said. But he was right. And so, I used to think I was a part of that whole mentality that being in there early and being seen and being, making it very obvious of like the amount that you were putting in. Um, and I really cared about that. And I thought that that was like a valuable measure of like work ethic and quality of work and all this stuff. And I was very young, in my early 20s at the time. But, even at that time, I had my son. And so I was also balancing that still too. And that was really important to me. But I was trying to do both of those things. And not only him saying that, but him kind of giving me that permission at that young age when he was in the role that he was in and, had mega sort of power and authority was just like that set the tone for the rest of everything for me. And knowing that you can't be completely selfish with that. But knowing that it's okay to take that time off and that you're going to be better off by doing that, I think it's just a really important concept. So there's that. And then, particularly in this role, I say new, but I've been here for 2.5 years, but I was really, this role is so distinctly different from what I was doing at Jellyfish as a VP of client management on an agency side, overseeing multiple clients and relationships, but not and having very deep relationships, but not being on that brand side, right? And like occasionally getting invited to speak to the president and like talk about marketing, and it was this whole to do, and it was like a big deal. Whereas now, being at APEI for the last couple of years, it's a different level of managing up and being at kind of the VP position, you need to be incredibly effective at both managing down to your, the layer that is helping you execute the strategic vision of the business, as well as boil all that stuff up into, these consumable marketing, kind of reviews and overviews that not only show that either you're, kicking butt and doing great, or here are the challenges, but here's how we're addressing them, but also, do it in a way, explain remarkable complexity in a way that aligns directly to just the ones that they care about, EBITDA, revenue, profitability, all the things, right? What they actually care about and being able to roll that up. But also say it to people that largely don't know much about marketing. And so you need the circus analogy, right? But you need that like all the time and in granular ways. And so, that has been a huge, I think, piece of my growth here is in, really being able to explain marketing to a non-marketer executive and being able to get them to care and understand what the contribution of marketing is to the business and the bottom line, and get them to see that marketing is not this cost center and that it's a revenue center and a revenue driver. And that's just, for the last at APEI, we've had, a nice kind of improvement in our stock. And as we're going through these earnings calls, we had one last night, and they're continuing to be positive, right? Quarter over quarter, and coming from a place where we were really challenged, to see that stock price go up and to know it's on the heels of, a call where marketing got multiple shout outs, and this is, kind of continuous as a trend. Like, we've done our job slightly, right? Like there's a 1,000 more conversations that always happen internally in order to get to that point and then remain at that point. But if you've gotten the, an executive level team and those that are running the business to understand marketing's position and contribution within that, you're doing
That's
pretty
very
good.
good. And folks, when she says, "Hey, the stock is doing okay," that's it's up 150% in the last 12 months.
Well, yes,
150%.
but again,
That's
there was
more
a
than
low,
great.
but
Like
yeah,
unheard
no, it's
of.
pretty good. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yes. Well, we've really turned. I mean, and and certainly by no means am I saying that is it's only because of marketing, but it's been a real sort of concert between both sides, obviously. But marketing's been shouted out multiple times on those calls, and it's so great to something it sinks in,
Yeah.
and that's when you know that you've been effective. So yeah, that's been very reward. It was a huge challenge, but very
Well,
rewarding.
that's the ultimate testament to you and your team, and not just great marketing, but marketing that actually drives the business forward and moves the needle. Like getting a shout out on the earnings
Yeah,
call, that's about as high of
yeah,
praise
great.
as you could possibly get, you know?
Right. No, I agree. I agree. Yeah. And that's, different people are motivated by different things, money, titles, whatever it is. But, I love recognition of the team, of the work of, individuals. It's just, that's
Yeah,
the best.
100%. Hey, so I know we're running up on time. Are you able to go a couple minutes past? Uh,
I can do, yeah,
okay,
like a
cool.
couple minutes.
So
Yeah.
this is my last question for you. It's on managing up. So you said that you've basically gotten a master's degree in that, and you've described, sort of why it's so important and what the keys are. Are there any like micro tips or nuggets that you've learned along the way for managing up that you might be able to share?
Um, say as little as possible. Like literally say 3 things,
Yeah,
and that's it. And like you better come in well prepared with what those 3 things are, and you stick to them and you repeat them constantly because that's all they can remember. Like they're getting a fire hose at them every single day, all day long, with numbers, with data, with how the business is running, with this problem, with this great success, with all that everybody wants their
yeah,
attention, right? And they do this all day long. Um, so you've got a limited amount of time to capture their attention, and it's normally right at the start of the meeting. And you need to be able to very explicitly and clearly articulate these are the 3 things that I need you to take away from this meeting. And then they can choose to tune out after that.
yeah,
You can go on your whole explanation of why you want them to care about
yeah,
that. And sure, some are more engaged than others. And I'm not, there's definitely constructive conversations in there that happen, but like approaching it with like the most executive summary of executive summaries is the most important thing that you can do. Just to like walk in, even better with one. But if you need the space for three,
yeah.
and then just assume that they've tuned out after that or won't recall it or won't recall.
Love that. All right, cool. Well, this is the very last question, and then we'll wrap. 30 seconds. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of things under control. Like you guys are doing amazing from a business perspective. It sounds like you've got your whole team
Figuring it out.
structure.
Yeah.
Um, 30 seconds.
Yep.
Biggest challenges. What's keeping you up at night?
So the biggest challenge is I think is just data integrity, architecture, tools, integration, measurement, all of that, how to do it right and evaluate decisions and, for the best ROI. I mean, it's just data, everything about
Oh,
it.
I feel your pain. I feel your pain, Haley.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that
Yeah.
was such an awesome episode. I loved it. I'm sure that everybody listening had at least one takeaway from it. If you listened to it and if you liked it, drop us a 5-star review or share this with a friend. We always appreciate that. Haley, stay around, stick around, and we're going to close up. But for folks that would like to learn more about you or APEI, where would you direct them?
Well, you could certainly go to apei.com, but Haleigh Forbes on LinkedIn, you'll find me there. Yeah, you'll recognize me. So
Cool. Well,
say
thank you
hi.
so much, Haley. We really enjoyed having you. Thank you, everybody, for listening here today. And that was another awesome episode of Revenue-Driven CMO. We'll see you next time. And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us here today. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at revenue-drivencmo.com. That's revenue-drivencmo.com. And hey, exclusive for listeners of this podcast, Web Mechanics will do 10 to 20 hours of work for you for free. Literally no sales calls, no BS. Just give them a problem and they will put a team to work for you for free for 10 to 20 hours. Even if you're already a client, if you're struggling with demand gen, lead gen, SEO, SEM, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, conversion optimization, if you can't get Facebook or Meta ads to work for the life of you, or you can't figure out attribution, Web Mechanics will take a good hard look at whatever problem you give them, whatever programs you put in front of them, and they will give you an objective, informed opinion, plus some advice from 10 to 20 hours of senior level attention. And that's just because you're a listener of this podcast. So I would suggest take them up on this offer. It's ridiculous. Go to revenue-drivencmo.com/free, fill out the 2-minute form, and you will not regret it. Literally zero downside, unlimited potential for growth. So do yourself a favor, revenue-drivencmo.com/free, no hyphens, no punctuations. You will be happy about that decision.